Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Sha'a Islam again, and today we are going to talk about Shah Ismael. Now, before we have talked about Shah Ismael the first, the same guy at the age of 12 who have found the Safavid Dynasty at the age of 12 in early 1500s, and until that to 1514 he never lost another war. Now, some may ask, from my last speech, he did lose to the Uzbeks some territories in Transoxiana, but he wasn't in direct control of that specific war that happened against Uzbeks in Transoxiana. He was not general, but this was the first time under him there was a defeat. And in 1514, Ismail faced the Ottoman Empire Shah Selim I, also known as Shah Selim Grim, and the border of Chaldiran in Lake Van. Now, the reason they lost the war, Shah Ismail I, because he's loyalist. The Qizilbash didn't have the answer of Selim Grim's Ottomans, muskets, cavalry, and the mobility they had. There was a myth, I guess, according to many, that after the defeat, Ismail I never laughed again in his life, and he still, after losing that battle, he keep on having this claim of charismatic leader of Ali radiallahu anhu, or he's currently the hidden imam. All these claims he still had, and divinity too, and he was keep on having conquest after conquest and battles after battles, and he tried to create an enemy of Ottomans until 1524 he died by food poisoning. And after that there was a chaos in Safavid Dynasty, and the next person who was in the throne was Tahmasp, the son of Ismail I, who was 10 years old that time. So he was not that ordinary, he was not that so special child like Ismail, who had been taken throne at 12. He was 10 and he was just an average kid. So at the age of 19, Tahmasp took the throne. But there was a huge amount of chaos and huge amount of destruction during his time, as the Uzbeks from 1533 to 1553 have attacked the Safavids 5 times and took many territories, and the Ottomans from 1534 to 1548 have attacked the Safavids 4 times and also took many territories, until in 1555 there was a treaty of Amasya in which both Ottomans and Safavid had recognized each other as a legitimate empire. Though the Safavids still lost the territories in eastern Anatolia and Iraq, and losing the territory in Iraq is a problem because they had 2 of the most holiest cities in Shi'a Islam, which was the official religion of Safavid Dynasty, the 12 were Shiites, and these 2 holy cities were Nazaf, where they believe that Ali radiallahu anhu was died in Nazaf and his burial place, and the Karbala, where Hussein and Hassan radiallahu anhu died. One died of poisoning, the other died of killing in the battle. So both of these places were very sacred and they lost it. And after that, Shia pilgrims had hard time of going to that cities, as it was under the Sunni control of Ottomans. Now the Safavids find out that they should change the capital because it was much close to the Ottomans, which was Tabriz, the capital Tabriz, and there were lots of Turks living there, in the Qizilbash, who were Turks too. So what they had done is they had switched the capital to a new place called Qazvim, Qazim, and it is 300 miles away from the previous capital, Tabriz, and very far from the frontier area. And it was in this city, most of the people who used to live were Iranians and less Turks. So now, for the first time in Safavid Dynasty, Iranians were influencing more than the Turks and the Qizilbash. who were Turks too. Tahmasp, from 1540 to 1553, he have went in a jihad or a battle in Caucasus mountain, and there he have took 10,000 man and women from Armenia, Georgia, and Persian, and the men were used as gulams and the female were used as caretakers or the concubines in the harem, which was a resting place for the kings. 1576. Also, one thing more I want to add was the Georgian women who were used as the most elite of the concubines, and it is believed by the Safavid that the Georgian women are the most beautiful women in the world. Now, after 1576, Tahmasp died, and there was a huge problem of succession, as there were too many successors to claim the throne, and Qizilbash were supporting each of these factions. Until by 1586, half of the Safavid dynasty was lost to the Uzbeks and the Ottomans, and until there was a new skilled leader was born, the grandson of Tahmasp, who was born in 1571 and died in 1629, and his name was Shah Abbas I, another great leader, just like his great-grandfather Shah Ismael I. Abbas was very skilled, and he had been unified the central government and create and military, and unified that too. And he saved the Safavid dynasty. If you can contrast this with the Mughals, it also happened in the time of Humayun, when Humayun almost lost his empire, and the brilliant general Bayram Khan have taken him back the empire. And it's the same too, but he's not general Abbas. Abbas is a leader of the empire who have been taken, the emperor who have been taken his rights back. So Abbas used this armies, which we have been talking a few minutes ago, the Armenians and the Georgians, as his own personal army, and they have a similarity with Janissary Corps in Ottomans. Now, who were Janissary Corps? We know of Janissary Corps, a group of slaves used to be brought from the Balkan region to Ottoman Empire, and they were used as an army, and they used to be converted to Islam, and they used to be used as army, the Janissary Corps. They have a same mirror of corps of army in Safavid, and they were known as gulams, who were the Georgians and the Armenian Christians who were brought into the Safavid dynasty and then used to be converted to Islam and joined the army. And these gulams were the personal guard of Abbas I. Now, Abbas I also make a mirror image of weaponries of Ottomans, as he brought cavalries, muskets, and artilleries. He had 10 artillery. He had 10 cavalries, 12 muskets, and 12 artilleries, which was used locally because it's very hard to move around the artilleries. So they were used, and Iranian landscape is like hilly region, mostly hilly region. So it's very hard to move these artilleries in the hilly regions. So these artilleries were used mostly in the local areas. Abbas have been recovered all those lands from the Uzbeks and Ottomans, which was lost during the time of Tahmasp. Though some of the land still remains under the control of Uzbeks and Ottomans, and some of the disputed areas. During the time of Abbas I, there were a population of 6 to 10 million living in Safavid dynasty. This was 1/3 of the Ottoman population of Safavid dynasty and 1/10 of Mughal empire. So they were very short in population, and it could be a trouble if they go to battle. Now let's talk about the peasants and the average people under Abbas, and the peasants felt much better under Abbas. Specifically in the northern Iranian peasants, who have to suffer a lot because of the war, because they used to live in the frontier areas which were mostly in the battle with the Ottomans, and their crops used to be destroyed when the battle happened. So what Shah Abbas the first did, that he hired the pastoral nomads to protect their lands during the war, and Qizilbash to protect their land. Some of these pastoral nomads were very good in cavalry and active in the military force. Some of them were helping these farmers because of tribal affiliation. Some of them did for money, and some of them did temporary security movement. By that time, Qizilbash were a little bit less powered, and though they still were holding high official political ranks and administration near the bazaars or the shops. Now let's talk about the non-Muslim subjects of Safavid Dynasty, and they weren't that much flourishing like the ones in Ottoman. And specifically, the worst of the treated minority were the Jews and the Zoroastrians. During the Hammurabi court in Spain, where King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had made a deal with the Jews that you either convert to Catholic religion or you die. So many Jews came from this persecution, and they were immigrated to Iran. At the beginning they were treated very well, the Jews, but later on in the 1720s they were persecuted because it was a belief that one Jewish convert to Islam had said to Abbas that Jews were doing black magic against Shah Abbas the First. So many of them were persecuted, and specifically Jews in Isfahan were forced to convert to Islam during that time. Until later on in the 17th century, Jews were allowed to come back to their old religion. But still, after the 17th century, Jews' properties were taken away, they were persecuted, they were starved, they were tortured, and they might have been wiped out from Iran if the Khawarite Empire didn't have came. But however, they survived, and even we see in the modern day Iran, it's the Jews are not being persecuted, and they are a very flourishing community, and they are one parliamentary member in Iran of Jewish community, and they're doing well actually in Iran compared to the rest of the Muslim world. So much better they're doing in Iran than Safavid Dynasty. And also the Zoroastrians were also persecuted so badly. The most best of the minorities that have been flourished was the Armenians, but still Armenians suffered not because of the religion but of the location, which was a frontier area, and Ottomans and Safavids were keep on destroying the crops, and that made the food shortage for the Armenians. Abbas liked the Armenians, and the reason is that because Armenians have a good contact skills and commercial and contact skills of business, and their contact skills goes all the way to Mughal Empire, Malabar Coast, Middle East, Central Asia, as far as Europe. Armenians were transformed. Businessmen Armenians were transformed to the new capital city, which was Isfahan, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, if you see today. And Iranian economy improved through the luxury goods that the Armenians to bring from China, which is silk, which was bought by the wealthy class for luxury purposes. Now the Georgian Christians, some of them also served in the court of Shah, who used to be converted to Islam and get the higher official ranks. Females Georgian females used to be purchased from the market. Some of them were forced to come to be concubine or slave women, and some were very badly dragged to become slave women, which is very tragic to hear such stories. At the beginning, Georgian Christians and Armenian Christians were given generous loans, but later on, after the 17th century, they were persecuted and harassed too by the Safavids. And actually, they were not united. Both Georgian and Armenian Christians were not united because they were equally hostile to each other, because Georgians were Orthodox Christians and Armenians are monophysite Christians. And united we rule, divided we suffer, and that would happen actually. Divided we fall actually. A minority of Hindu groups used to live in Safavid Dynasty, and at the beginning they did well. They were mostly money lenders, money changers, and most of the Hindus were seen as idolaters, and they were allowed to have the religion freedom until 1950s. Hindus were also persecuted and harassed. Now, in between the Muslim faction, which is Sunnis were also persecuted and harassed and killed by Shi'as or the Safavids, the 12 were Shi'as. And the Ottomans, in reply, were also killing the Shi'as in the Ottoman Empire. So it was a both-way attack going on, which is very unfortunate, and it's not allowed in Islam. Now, let's come into the social status of the women. Women were doing much better in Safavid Dynasty compared to the Mughal and the Ottoman Empire, where women were not much doing well in those empires compared to Safavid Dynasty. Safavid Dynasty, the women used to practice calligraphy. The elite women were very highly educated, and they used to fund the charitable organization and construct monuments like mosque, masjid, and other beautiful buildings. And they do have political influence, which they used to use in the benefit of the people. Though Safavid women were not allowed to go to the markets, but still the Qizilbash women were allowed to move around the markets and different places, because they are pastoral nomads, so they have to do all these works, otherwise they cannot survive. So they used to mix with man and female, used to mix each other, and both used to work together, and they used to leisure. So we finished this today, and then later on we will talk about part 4 of the Safavid Dynasty and a very short speech about part 5. And later on we will talk about what goes on later on in Safavid Dynasty in part 4. Until then, have a nice day. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. If you have any question, please ask me below the comment. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.